Hey, what's up? I'm Josh. This is the Audio-Technica and Opus collaboration, the ATH R70X Refine. This is going to be a limited run of only 1,000 units, and today I'm going to tell you whether or not I think it's worth picking up. Now, Opus did send this out, but they're not paying me to say anything good or bad, but there are affiliate links down below if you do want to grab this. Doesn't cost you anything, but it does help the channel out. This is also a first impressions video only. Unfortunately, I've only had this thing for a couple days before this video was created, so I haven't gotten a ton of time to really thoroughly dive into this, but I already have a few other videos planned for this, so even though this one's gonna be kind of short, I have a lot of content surrounding this coming. So subscribe for that if you want. So if you are into ultralight headphones, this is going to be right up your alley if you don't already own the R70X. The HD600, this headphone right here, it's a really light headphone. A lot of people think it's like the benchmark for a light headphone, is 250 grams. This remarkably shaves off 40 grams off of that at just 209 grams, which is outrageously light. Now, all that lightness does have one compromise, which is overall build quality. It is not the nicest for the money. It doesn't feel poorly built. Like you can hear there's no creaks or cracks or anything weird when you move the headphone around. And it does feel pretty well constructed, but yeah, actual tangible build quality is not super great. That being said, all this lightness and some of the changes that they've made to the Refine actually make it a very, very comfortable headphone. So one of the biggest changes that they've made, which impacts not only the comfort and the sound, is going to be the ear pads. They've now made them deeper. And to continue the comparisons, it's actually a bit deeper of pads than is on the HD600. The HD600 on my pads are a little under an inch deep. This is a little bit over an inch deep. If you didn't actually know, the R70X has a bit of a cult following, but one of the most common complaints and common modifications for it is changing out the stock pads because they're not that comfortable. This changes that. I wouldn't change these pads at all unless you were looking for substantial sound differences with different pads. Something that adds to the comfort here is something that they call a 3D winged pad, which is this. It's kind of like this paddle thing that goes on either side of your head. One benefit of this is that when it spreads across your head, you can see it doesn't have any top pressure whatsoever. I think that this design only works because it is so light, but it does work. This is honestly a remarkably comfortable headphone, one of the most comfortable of any price category. It's awesome. One small complaint I have is that this is a ambidextrous shaped headphone, and the right and left ear indicator are very small and hard to see. I wish they were just a little bit more obvious. Maybe coloring the cable with red and black would aid that being a little bit better. The second thing I'm not a huge fan of is actually the cable. It is a locking style connector. I'm not a huge fan of this. Not only do I think it's unnecessary, but I also think that it makes aftermarket cables a bit more difficult to find a good fit. Now, when it comes to sound, the thing that I want to say the most is that they're limiting this headphone to 1,000 units, and that is a shame. This is a very good headphone. It's one of my favorite headphones at $300 already, and it's definitely my favorite Audio-Technica so far. Unfortunately, the Opus website is a little bit vague on whether or not they actually made any internal changes. So I'm not sure if the sonic changes are purely based off the pads or if they are a combination of the pads and the internal changes. But the sound quality coming out of here is apparently warmer than the original R70X, which I think is a good thing because I think this thing nails the sound. Now, I've been able to compare against headphones like HD600, which makes the kind of comparisons a little bit easier just because I'm so familiar with it and so are a lot of you. So I'll be comparing a fair bit here. I think treble is going to be an area that a lot of people are going to have a lot of opinions about, myself included. And it's something where if you go one direction for sound, you'll disappoint this group of people. If you go a different direction for sound, you'll disappoint this group of people. It's kind of a no-win scenario these days for treble. For reference, a Sundara. If you sit on the fence of a Sundara being too bright, this headphone will probably nail the treble forwardness for you. It's not a very treble forward headphone at all. But if you sit on the side of the fence that thinks that Sundara is just about perfect, you might actually consider this to be a bit too warm. So it depends on where you're coming from and what your position is on treble forwardness. Now, when it comes to actual detail and refinement there, it's actually fairly refined and fairly detailed. And I wouldn't consider this an under-detailed headphone at all. It just doesn't come across as pushed forward and as sharp as something like a Sundara. So a Sundara, just because of its treble forwardness, might seem a bit more precise up there. Even though I think for actual detail, it's pretty much on par. I think the forwardness lets you access that detail a bit better on Sundara. One of the reasons why this comparison is so important is because mid-range is possibly the most important feature for sound on the R70X Refine. It's very, very good. In fact, I was kind of surprised. I'm honestly not a huge fan of Audio-Technica as a brand for their sound signature, just personal preference thing. So when I'm listening to this headphone, and my immediate reaction when first hearing it is how natural things sound, especially in the mid-range, which is something that I love from headphones like HC600. That was very impressive to see, and I consider this to be a very natural sounding, kind of neutral timbre headphone. It's very, very good. It's a bit less upper mid forward than the HC600, but I don't necessarily think that's a downside. HC600 comes across a bit more focused and pushed forward for vocals overall, though this is like just behind that, but it comes with added benefits like better sound staging. And also because of how the mid bass and lower mid range are introduced on this headphone, in some cases, this comes across a little bit thicker on the low end of vocalists. So if you have a deeper male vocalist like myself, it comes across just a bit thicker, a bit more pronounced, and a bit more forward than the HC600. So I'd say upper mid-range goes to 600 for a win, and lower mid-range might actually go to the Refine for a win. Now bass. This is gonna be the make or break area, I think, for most people. This is a very good headphone in almost every area except for sub bass. It's a bit like the HC600. You're just not going to be getting a ton of sub bass out of this. I just reviewed the Mojo 2, which has an EQ adjustment for its mid bass and sub bass bands, and I would personally be cranking those up if I were using something like that. Now, as a side note, speaking of those amplifiers, this is a very strange impedance of 470 ohms. And so I would highly recommend an amplifier for this headphone. It's definitely going to be tailored towards audiophiles. It's the same impedance rating as the original R70X. So amplifiers are recommended. Sorry, back to the bass. This for functionality of a video that we'll talk about later, which is going to be gaming performance, which I actually think this is very good for. The sub bass being not super strong here isn't really a downside actually, and it's actually a benefit. But for people who like bassy headphones and don't care as much for mid-range or treble, this is not going to be your headphone. Like I said before with the lower mid-range and the mid-bass, this actually does fill out quite a bit and has even more than that of the HC600. And I actually really enjoy the mid-bass coming out of here. It fills out things like drums and bass instruments very, very well. It's when you get into that really, really low artificial sounding bass where you have like things like dubstep with those super deep bass drops, that's where you're gonna slightly miss out on this headphone. Now, sound staging, a clear win over HC600, and one of the key elements to making this such a great gaming headphone. I'll have a lot more thoughts in the gaming video, but for now, it's a total win. Now, one of the biggest and most important things to talk about here is the price reduction of this, going from $350 for the R70X to $300. While it's not a massive price drop, considering you get more comfortable pads, which most people were wanting anyways, and in my opinion, probably a better sound quality, and you get the same rest of the build, and it doesn't skimp out on things like bags and a nice storage box. It's a pretty good deal. So should you pre-order? Well, this depends. Are you a bass lover where that is your main focus? Then probably not. This is not going to be your headphone. If you're into that, I would recommend getting something else. If you value things like vocals or gaming performance or an ultralight headphone, a comfortable headphone, something that sounds natural, or something that just sounds super open in general, then yeah, I would totally recommend this. Like I said, I think it's one of the best headphones out there for 300 bucks right now. I do really hope that this goes well for them, and I hope they reconsider making more than 1,000 units. Maybe they can make a version that has, you know, maybe a different color style or something like that, so it's maybe not the gold refined version. But yeah, I would love to see a permanent collaboration, something along the lines of what Drop did with the HC6XX. If they could do something like that with this, that would be awesome. All right, that's gonna be it. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.